automated and more controllable. But back then, it was tough. If you didn't get the take, you didn't get the take. And Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers was always about real band playing in real time, kind of like the Rolling Stones. They didn't go in and record every part separately and mix them all together. And it was about real musicians playing in real time. So that means if you make real mistakes, you have to really do it over again, too. And sometimes he just wasn't getting what he wanted at Tom, and he was getting very upset. And what happened often is he'd make a lot of great demos at home. When you're home and you're working on the song, and you're feeling great, and you make a home demo, and he has a great spirit, and then you try to duplicate that in the recording studio. That could be really hard. People call it demo-itis. And that really frustrated him. And Rick Rubin explained, after a certain while, when digital came in, you can take those home demos, that guitar track, we could use that, you don't have to start over. That was such a liberation at Tom. So as time went on, he became easier with the process. But he always worked really hard. And he said, I thought this was very touching, he said in our book, it always feels good to finish an album because I've done it long enough to know these things are going to be around a lot longer than me. It's something that wasn't there, and now it is. I love that about art. You just created something, and now it's here, and it could be here longer than you. I think he understood that. And I know it's been really tough for all of us, and really hard to accept that he's not around. So I always pictured I'd do another edition of the book, and we'd add some chapters together, because I had this happy hope of going back to Malibu and hanging with him, because that was just about the most fun I've ever had. Doesn't get much better than just hanging with Tom and talking about his music all the time. It was such a joy. I never considered we'll do another version and Tom wouldn't be here for it. So that's been tough. What's really made up for it is getting to meet so many people like me who love him so much. And the love for Tom is authentic as his music, I've found. And you guys are just as real and loving as he is. And as you know well, more than just about any rock star, he really cared about you guys. He cared about his fans. Even if they just want to raise his LP price $1. God, my fans, they might not want to pay another $1, even for a Tom Petty album. I got a feeling everyone would have, They wouldn't blame Tom either, but he took it on himself. You would just think those record companies, poor Tom has to deal with this. No, he's like, they're going to blame me, so he fought that. And he said when he fought that, he stood up against a giant record company. He wrote, I won't back down. And he didn't back down, when he believed in something, but he also assumed that his peers, some of them would join him, and nobody joined him. They were like, I don't know if anyone told Tom, you don't do this, you don't oppose them, But not Tom, he cared about the fans first, and that was so unusual. And when he felt radio and the whole music business shifting, where radio used to play songs because they were great, and they became hits because people loved them so much they bought them. When it started shifting, where suddenly the music business was doing the marketing first and then coming up with the product, Tom knew that was no good. And when he saw radio changing, where the DJs no longer can make choices about rock and roll, that's not going to lead to good stuff. And so he wrote The Last DJ, which was an indictment of radio and the business itself, which again is not something you need to bite the hand that's been feeding you for decades. But Tom recognized too, that hand wouldn't have much to feed anyone with, if not for great songwriters, and he recognized that. And Tom, like me, being songwriters, I think all songwriters have great reverence for the art of songwriting and the craft, and people who do it great. And once there's someone that's done it once, but the whole world knows it, like Ruth Ann Friedman, my friend, wrote the song Windy by the Association. She's mostly a folkie, but her friend Van Dyke Parks got the song to the Association, it became a hit. Most people know that song, at least people my age. And then, it's a great song too. But one song, and that impacted the world. And Tom's done that so much, and so there's just true reverence for him. And reverence is the perfect word because it's a mixture of respect, but awe too. I respect the craftsman, but there's just awe at the genius of the guy. He was really ingenious, and he had mastery of the song for him. And that's what it comes down to. If you don't have a good song, you don't have a lot to work with, and he knew that. And when he got signed to a record deal, he knew that means I'm going to have to write 10 good songs a year, not just any good songs. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers songs, that good. He didn't want to let you guys down again. And he said, you know, I could be like Stanley. I could go out every night and be a rock star and have fun and go to premieres, but I have to stay home and write the songs. And so he kind of complained about it, but at the same time, he loved it because he got much more satisfaction out of that. I think all songwriters realize after a while you can have romances. They don't often last. But if you write a song about that romance, or of course the great Broken Hearted song, you keep the song. The romance is long gone, but you get the song. And Tom did that many times. And when he was broken-hearted, when he was hopeful, he wrote great songs about all aspects because they were human and they were real. But he really understood songs, and he had basic, fundamental understanding of songs and the importance of simplicity and what makes a song great. A lot of things that would almost seem obvious to songwriters, and yet songwriters often miss them. And it's one reason that Tom's songs resonate with us. They did when we first heard them, and they continue to for decades. Because a song, especially now in modern times, it's an ancient thing. For someone to be working on something so ancient, it's like someone who spends all their time, taking care of thatching roofs or cobbling shoes. A lot of people don't put time into that anymore. It's an ancient craft. And songs use ancient craft, things like rhyme and melody that, even most poetry doesn't use rhyme anymore, but songs do. And Tom was a great rhymer. But the thing about songs is if you make your rhyme too obvious, it seems contrived. It seems like hack songwriting. So you have to use these things like rhymes that are contrivances in a way, but in a way that they don't seem contrived. You have to intentionally and consciously tap into that unconscious part, where words are poetic, yet conversational, and then he's using symbols, symbology and metaphors and song structure, and add to that music, melody. And we don't think about melody very much, but in truth, there are people that are studying, neuroscientists studying musicians' minds, trying to find out how the mind works of a musician, and they have really no clue about melody. Where does that come from? We know more about getting to Mars and back at this moment than we know about melody. Or as you guys know, they call them earworms, when you just wake up in the morning or any part of the day and you have a song in your head. But it's not necessarily the most recent song you heard. It's a song that's got in there for some reason, but who makes that choice and how does that happen? They don't really know. And I think in a lot of ways that's what's beautiful about songwriting, that you're dealing with a mystery. Leonard Cohen said to me, he said, if I knew where the great songs came from, I'd go there more often. And then he said, being a songwriter is like being married to a mystery. It's like being a Catholic nun in many ways. Which I thought was quite religious at first, but I know what he means. Every day you're going to, you're devoted to this mystery that you can't even see or touch or completely understand, but your whole life is about that. And songwriters, I think, rejoice in that. And I talked to Tom, because he was a great melodist. So good you might not even think about it, but just free falling, an obvious example, that jump up to the up to the octave on the chorus, which was Jeff Lynne's idea. He said, why don't you jump up the octave here? It's all great contribution. Because suddenly it's like somewhere over the rainbow. It's that kind of leap is emotional, and that's old-fashioned songwriting. But Tom understood that, that melodies can reach your heart, but you don't want to do it in a way that once again seems too contrived. But you match it with Tom Petty words like Free Fall, and it's just perfect. But he had just great mastery of all those parts of the song form. And also how he put together chords. And that's what it comes down to, especially if you're a guitar-based songwriter, which he mostly was. So he wrote some great songs, like Southern Accents on piano and others. Room at the Top on piano. How you put together chords that's where the melody is rooted. That's what the melody comes out of. And for you guys that know, has been playing his songs, I know a lot of us have, which is fun and a joy and a great education for any songwriter. His use of chords is ingenious because he's playing rock and roll mostly, and there's only so many chords that you're gonna use in rock and roll. But every now and then he'll use just one or two in a place you wouldn't consider it. Whoa! And it's just genius. And in a song, it's easy to go away from the normal thing, but it's getting back seamlessly that really takes genius. And he would do that so many times. Sometimes it would just come naturally to him. He said with Southern Accents, which he wrote at 4 a.m. at home on the piano, he started flowing and he was just so moved. He knew what he was doing. And then when it came time to get to that bridge, the bridge starts this beautiful sequence about a dream of his mother kneeling down by his bed and praying. pretty touching image. It always reminds me of Let It Be, you know, when he's talking about Mother Mary, and such a beautiful, holy kind of feeling in that song. And Tom said that bridge, the music came to him immediately. He said, the first times I went to those chords, those were the chords. That doesn't usually happen, especially the bridge, because it's the one place in the song you could go someplace different and never repeats. And then you could come back. So it's kind of a chance to get away a little bit, but to come back. And often that takes a lot of work to get a bridge that can do that, and yet just works so beautifully. And he did it first time. And so sometimes like that, things would just come through him, but other times he'd work really hard to get the chords exactly what he wanted. And he paid a lot of attention to that. And I talked to him a lot of times about that. You know, you take sometimes just 3 chords, but you turn them inside out. Instead of the 1-4-5, as we know, it's 5-1-4 often, which is just a little change, but you feel it differently and it propels things. And he does that thing often, which is meaningless if you're not a musician. You just know it feels good. But to us nerds, you know, we pay attention to this stuff. And so, still wonderful. So when I would interview Tom and other great songwriters who I just had off for, and I grew up learning to write songs by learning their songs, Paul Simon and Bob Dylan, I would learn the songs. And these guys, they're geniuses in writing lyrics and all that, but it's in the music. And fundamentally, it's in what Simon called the crucial balance of words and music. If you got a great lyric, the best ever, you could have any one of Tom's lyrics, but without a melody that propels it, is visceral, and is rock and roll, and is coming, you know, from his soulful center, it wouldn't be anything. And vice versa. It's the way the two go together. He knew that. And so he was very conscious of that. And he was conscious of all the songwriter tricks. You know, like a way to get people's attention, like Barry Manilow would often do these, what I would consider very small C key changes, where somebody's doing the chorus and boom, it just jumps up and does another chorus, and it's like, wow, that was dramatic, it almost knocked you over. But Tom, you know, he knew about that stuff. If he ever did anything like that, it would be subtle. You know, he's not gonna get carried away that way. But he was aware of all that stuff. And so he told me he paid a lot of attention to Buddy Holly. He says, you know, Buddy Holly wrote almost every song in A major, and he'd use mainly 3 chords, but he'd use them in such ingenious ways. He'd put them every this way and that way, and Tom learned that, and Tom did the same thing, and so many people have learned so much from learning Tom's songs. And so I did that, and every time I learned one, it was just thrilling. Like Insider, for example, like, how is he making that? I said, oh. And as he said many times, it's not easy. It might sound easy. I know it's only 3 minutes long or something, but to make something that perfect, that works forever in 3 minutes, that's a huge achievement. Because a song is a very limited form. And to create something in such a narrow space that is boundless, that doesn't have any limits, that's really an amazing achievement. Krishnamurti, the philosopher, said, limitations create potential. And songwriters see that. Instead of thinking, well, we only have a tiny bit of space here, what are we going to do? They embrace that, and Tom embraced that. And it was always fascinating to see how his chords went together and how he did that. And often, you know, the chords, you might just see them online, it's very simple, but they were always playing interesting voicing. Sometimes when he and Mike would play in a chord, and Ben Mont, a genius of music, they were throwing in some voicings and some, you know, adult chords more than you would know often. So they're never as easy as you think, but always put together with such genius and inventiveness and love of the process. So I learned his songs, and that really appealed to him when I went in the first time for, I was talking about Wildflowers. I love to bring up the old songs, and some songwriters don't want to talk about old stuff. They're talking about my new album. Tom loved it, because I brought up 2 Gunslingers, which was always one of my favorites. A Secret Hero, like you guys know. There's so many of the songs like that are just brilliant. If they put that out with, you know, as a single with an MTV, you know, video that was cool, that would have been a hit. You know, so many, you know, the ones that were chosen to become hits, almost all of them became hits because they were great, but the others were phenomenal. And 2 Gunslingers is so brilliant because it's funny, yet it's serious at the same time, and it's propulsive music, and it's about 2 gunslingers in the Old West whose job is to go out and have duels, which is not a job you can do too long, you know, it's not something you can sustain. And they're in the song questioning their existence, you know, and then realizing, you know, it's an existential, funny song that takes place in the Old West with rock and roll. perfect, perfect song. Who would do that well except Tom Petty and make it seem so real? And they're saying, I'm taking control of my life now. We don't have to kill each other right now. And it's really a song about nonviolence and maybe considering peace. That we don't have to keep killing each other. We could do something else. But Tom is not going to come out and just say, consider peace. He wants to do it in a way that's fun and interesting, and he's taking care of you guys. So he loved that I brought up that song. He showed me a poster that his friend, I think it was Jim Lanahan, sent him of an old Western movie that inspired it. But he also really loved that I learned the songs and that I was a songwriter, and I understood that because so much of his genius was there, but these guys rarely get to discuss music, the actual mechanics of music, because most people writing about music aren't musicians. And so they write about words often, or the show, or they talk about sports or something else, but so rarely do they get to talk about music. And some people, like Brian Wilson, the guys in Steely Dan, that's where they live completely. And Tom lived in the world more than a lot of rock stars. He was in the real world often, not all the time. But when he realized I'd learned the songs, he really liked that. So after we did our first interview on Wildflowers, first 2 interviews, I interviewed him a few times after that, and we always had a great talk and had fun. And so I had this idea that it would be just great to do a whole book with him. But the reason he liked talking to me was I was never asking about his personal life. That was always kind of my promise to any songwriter. We'll just talk about the music, your songwriting, creative process, no personal life stuff. And that appealed to most people because they don't necessarily want to answer those questions, and certainly Tom. So that was the idea of the book. And so I said it to him just at the same time Omnibus, the publisher, was saying, you need a book. There hadn't been a book about Tom Petty yet. At that time, there had been, I think, 12 books on Madonna. Not one on Tom Petty. This is the business I'm in right there. That shows you a lot. Madonna had a huge impact. I'm not taking that away, but Tom. There's a lot of musicians, some great stars and some others who are what we call critics' favorites. Where the critics say, this matters, and they keep saying that. And then there's the others that the people know, that matters more than anything, and that doesn't stop. And that's who Tom was. A lot of the critics never quite got him. They always put him in the shadow of Dylan and the Beatles or the Byrds, as if he was trying to be something other than he was, because some of his music had those sounds, and he was influenced by those, of course. But he was Tom Petty, and I know they felt, some of them, that the music came easy to him and that he wasn't important. But coming after a few decades, when it just kept expanding, I think they all should have caught on. And this is a true story. When American Treasure came out, I went to a wonderful party in LA for him. It was sad because he wasn't there, but the guys from the band were there, and Dana, and Mary Clouser, and Tony, his managers, and also a lot of the DJs in town, and all the critics I know. And one critic I've gotten to know really well, I won't name him by name, he's a friend of mine, but he said to me, he plays these critic games, like, who do you think of rock stars will be important 50 years from now? Now, number one, 50 years isn't that far anymore. It's been 50 years since Abbey Road. It's not like we're in a whole different world. 50 years before I was born, was ragtime, or like pre-ragtime, like 1908. That was a different world, but rock and roll has been here for decades. And, when Elvis started, those guys all just assumed this is a fad and it'll go soon, it'll be gone. It's still with us, thank God, and we're still here, and it still means a lot to us. But this guy's critics said, who do you think will be important? And I said, Tom Petty. Really, you think so? Why? He's one of the greatest songwriters of our time. And his fan base is expanding every day. And it's true. So many people, they say, I always loved him, I always knew he was great, but since we left him, I've listened to so much else. And, oh my God. And everyone's just in awe of how much he did, and all those tracks that he didn't even put on albums that are great. And the new stuff that comes out. And so I see it's been expanding. The love for Tom is just so poignant and beautiful. But critics still can't admit it. So he goes, okay, Paul, tell me, what song of Tom's will anyone remember 50 years from now? So I just mentioned Free Fall. He goes, really? Not a good song. Okay, I don't have to go on. You get the or another DJ, a well-known DJ in LA told me, you know what? I never played him once.
Oh my God.
Well, I think that was a mistake. I guess he couldn't find one good Tom song that was good for radio. It was on a hip radio station. I think he probably heard that those other stations, they play them all the time, so we gotta not do that. But Tom loved that his stuff was for everybody. And he said many times that, old folks love my song, because those are a lot of my fans and, their parents.